Even more striking is the idea here that the way that it was premised, the way that it was prefaced by William Barr has always been that there was a close call to be made here, and that there was actually Rod Rosenstein and himself who had a difference of opinion on the legal basis for why Mueller chose to have this dynamic. How could that be? It sounds as though there was a very clear policy in place under the mandate of special counsel. It wasn't an option for him to buck the system. There was a protocol in place, even up to Congress, to figure out whether he could actually say he was no longer going to follow that rule. It wasn't an option. So you have this whole the premise that Barr has laid out about there being, well, obviously there was a quick 8-way to resolve it. This to me sounds like Barr. From the moment we saw that 19-page memorandum, he was going to have a self-fulfilling prophecy in the narrative of how he crafted it going forward and the resolution of whether or not there had been enough information about obstruction of justice. That's extraordinarily dangerous, given the fact that he's had, 1, 2, 3 bites at the apple to try to craft the narrative in this way. And the American people are still trying to comb through the 400 pages that President Trump's personal attorneys were able to see in advance to prepare a rebuttal about these very things. That's what's so astonishing about the idea of obstruction. And again, remember, in his actual speech today from the podium, he was dismissive of the notion of it. He said, well, with not, in spite of this area of whether it's obstructive here, besides this little meager concept of whether the head of the executive branch has violated the law or endeavored to do so, remember, he was frustrated by the cloud over his presidency. That's what the Attorney General wants you to hang your hat on to try to inoculate the President of the United States.
And I think it's important to realize that what he's trying to do, Barr, is to make it sound like there's almost like a scientific rule, was it criminal or not? And it's not. All of this report very much reminds us of prosecutorial discretion. It's the policy at the Justice Department about how you approach indicting a sitting president. It's not something enshrined in the Constitution or some scientific formula. And so the spin here is to make it sound like it simply didn't rise to the scientific level that you can do it. But it's really an exercise of discretion. It may be a very valid one, reasonable. Mueller's a very honorable man. Other prosecutors, other Justice Departments could have disagreed.
And I think it's fair to say that it's impossible to read this report and think if this was Donald Trump, CEO, charged with all these things in terms of obstruction of justice, that the action would have been the same. I mean,
Absolutely.
He details action after action after action that they clearly seem to think is potentially, if not definitively, obstruction of justice, with the underlying argument, but we can't prosecute him because he's the President of the United States.
Well, by the way, Jake, one thing that's important I'm still looking for in this report is not only, now that we kind of know why Mueller chose not to reach the ultimate conclusion of obstruction, he also had within his purview the opportunity to inquire about that policy, about whether a sitting president should, in fact, never be indicted. He had the ability to actually endeavor to question it and say, should we re-examine this policy? It's not actually written in stone. And I don't know that he actually endeavored to do so. So I have questions still about why, although you had the option to exercise that and you had 10 different categories of potential obstruction, why you would not ask the question of, should we revisit this little point about indicting a sitting president?
I think that really goes to Mueller's personality. I mean, he's by the book. He's not looking.
He's an institutionalist.
The buck system, and he actually references some of the reasons for that policy. It would interfere with the president's ability to govern. It would raise constitutional issues. So again, I think it's a reasonable decision that he made, but people have to realize it's not the only decision that could have been made.